Well, I am excited to be here with you this morning. I am thankful that Brock invited me. Brock and I go way back. So when I was in high school down in San Antonio, Texas, one summer, Brock was our youth intern. And so we've known each other for 20 plus years, 25 years. There's been many steps in my journey personally within our family that Brock's been a part of, and we're just grateful for his presence. We're grateful for this church family, we've been in and out in various ways. I've served as a youth minister in the area. We've come here for summer youth series. I've been here for leadership meetings put on by colleges such as ACU and others, and we're thankful for the service that you as a church continue to serve in this community to one another, and for the impact that you have that's impacted our family and impacted the city and the world around us. And we're just grateful for you. And it's amazing when I get a chance to visit to see the love that is present here. So thank you for having me here this morning. So I want to start off this morning by asking you about a particular service or program that you may be familiar with. It's a service that came out when I was just before I went off to college. So just as I was about to be a freshman off at Bible college, this service came out, and it changed my world because it gave me access to one of my favorite things, which is entertainment and movies. And when I was going into college came the first iteration of Netflix. Yes. How many of you are familiar with Netflix? Yes? We all are in some level or another. And I mean, it's infiltrated our culture. It's across, you see it everywhere. It even has its own catchphrase. We won't repeat it in church. It's not appropriate. But Netflix is everywhere. But here's the thing. If you are younger than me, then the Netflix you know today is not how it started. So anyone who is Gen Z, Gen Alpha, younger than me, the Netflix you know today is not the way that it was when I was in college, because the original Netflix were these bad boys. Yes. It was a mail service of DVDs to where you had to either write on a form or you had to go online and fill out. You could have, I think, up to 2 movies, depending on what plan you had. But you could pick a couple of movies, have them mailed to where you were living, and then you could watch them before sending them back, which is awesome because I didn't have to drive to the video rental store. So this was great. And it became a huge distraction when I was a freshman in college, as you can probably imagine. So while I was a good student. I didn't fail my classes. I got good grades, but I probably didn't study or do as much work as I should have my freshman year because I was ordering these bad boys. But then about halfway through my freshman year, something else came to town that made it even easier when this came at our local McDonald's. And this was not good. And because now I didn't have to wait for those orders to come through the mail, now I could just go down to the local Walgreens or McDonald's and I could go and lift that fun little sunshade that we've all experienced before and get my DVDs at the red box. To where like a vending machine, you could trade in one DVD and get a new and watch it. And I watched movies ad nauseum my freshman year. But then, going into sophomore year, school got a little bit harder, started taking some more capstone courses, started taking a little bit more difficult classes. It was also in my sophomore year that my girlfriend at the time, now wife, came to college with me. And so something had to change. I couldn't watch as many movies as I had been watching. My priorities shifted a little bit. I had to focus more on school. I needed to focus more on my girlfriend. I needed to focus more on the relationships that I had. And so I had to reorient the way I operated. So I didn't watch nearly as many movies the rest of my college career. And the thing is, at various points in our life, there have been times when we've had these addictions or we've had these distractions that have come in where we have centered our life around something. I can tell you multiple times where it's happened in my life. A short time after I graduated college, there became out a new invention in my young adulthood. This bad little boy here. The iPhone came out, and I was one of the early adopters in like the second or third generation. and I got quite addicted. It's hard when you've been waiting all your life growing up, trying to get onto the internet, having to not tie up the family phone line and wait for the 5 minutes it takes for AOL to get you online, to now suddenly I had immediate access to everything right in the palm of my hand. And I had to have some tough conversations with people in my life who had to remind me that this is not the most important thing. I need to spend less time there. I needed to not get distracted by that. And so I had to reorient my life so I wasn't so distracted. There's various points in my life where I've gotten distracted by things that matter in my life because something else came in, and whether I grew addicted to it or I just placed too much value in it or too much time into it. And the thing is, this happens to all of us. For you, it may be sports. Maybe you're one of those people who ESPN has to be on the TV at all times that you're at your house. Or maybe you just cannot miss a single football game on a Saturday or a Sunday. Or maybe for you, it's politics. You're constantly having to have a say. You're constantly having to intake and output and have a piece in the debate. Maybe it's your children, where your whole life is oriented around being taxi service to the next thing and the big thing and to soccers and to meetings and to all kinds of things. Maybe there are various points in time where it almost becomes unhealthy how we get distracted and centered around one single thing, that some of the things in our lives may take a back seat that we may need to put some importance and priority on. And we've all heard the phrase or the idea before about where we spend our time or the things that we invest in, the way we live our lives, those are things we valued. We may have heard it in various ways, but ultimately, the way we live our lives is the way that we show value to things. So my question that I want us to ask this morning as we dive into our text is, what do we do when our lives aren't reflecting the things we want to value? What do we do when we get distracted by or we look at the things in our lives that are keeping us from living towards or into or through the values or beliefs that we may have or believe that we have? You may have heard the phrase before, like, actions speak louder than words, and we live this as true in other people's lives, where we can say, well, they may say that, but the way they live their life, really, this is what they believe or value. It can be more difficult for us to take an inward look and look at how am I living my life, and am I living in such a way that reflects the values that I have? And here's the thing, this isn't a new conundrum. This is something that has been in our world and in people's lives since the beginning of time. From the very beginning of, if you were to go back and open your Bible to the very beginning, the first book in Genesis, you see God created the world. He created man and woman, and Adam and Eve are in the garden, and they are living into this life that God created for them in a way that God has called them toward, until a distraction comes along. And suddenly they give up one thing and reorient their lives towards this distraction. And now you look throughout Scripture and you can see story after story and time again where people are trying to live into the way God has called them to live, into a better future, into more abundant life, and distractions come. And there are entire books and prophets writing, trying to call God's people back towards the values in their lives that they need. And it continues, and it's this cyclical cycle that continues all the way into today. And so today I want to look at a very small passage. It's just 3 verses. And if you have your Bibles and you want to read along, or you can follow along the screen if I think we might have it, that you can read along with us, but we're going to be in the Gospel of Matthew. And the Gospel of Matthew it tells the life of Jesus as he walked here on earth. And Matthew was one of the close disciples with Jesus. He lived life with Jesus for years, eating together, sleeping together, walking together, like they did life together. And Matthew records the events of Jesus' words and life and the ways that he lived in his gospel. And we're going to be in Matthew's gospel in chapter 13, starting in verse 44 here in just a moment. But before we read this small story, this small 3 verses of parables, I want to just kind of highlight the theme of what's going on through Matthew's gospel, of where he is drawing people towards, because he's writing to an audience that of people who have been part of this Jewish life. They understand who God is. They know who God is. And he is trying to tell them Jesus' words of the way they've been living and calling them into a new life of where Jesus is calling them. Because one of Jesus' first sermons in Matthew's gospel is a sermon that has come to be known as the Sermon on the Mount. And this sermon is full of richness, where Jesus is saying, you've heard that it was said like this in the law that you follow, and trying to be closer to God and be like God. But I tell you that it's this. So he might say, you have heard, do not murder. But it's not enough just to simply follow that. It's, I tell you that you need to not call your brother foolish, or you need to not call your sister stupid. You need to live into that. And if you are living in a way that reflects this poor, foolish behavior, you need to set down what you're doing. Don't go to church. Don't go to synagogue. Put down your sacrifice. Go reconcile with your relationship first. And this is new to people. He says, you've heard, he tells the Lord's Prayer of this is how you should talk to God. And it's a new way of talking to God in a way that is familiar and close and relational. But my favorite thing about the Sermon on the Mount is the way Jesus begins it. Because he starts off with these verses. They're called the Beatitudes, in which Jesus offers an invitation to all who are listening in this crowd. And he starts off by saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who care nothing about faith, who care nothing about or know nothing about what it means to know God. Blessed are you, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. And then he lists several other people groups. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who are hurting, blessed all the way to those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, who just crave it, and blessed are those who are persecuted because they are so faithful in living into righteousness. And no matter where you find yourself in between, from those who care deeply about faith to those who know little about it, and everyone in between, you're invited to the words that I'm about to say. And then Jesus proceeds to turn people's thinking of the kingdom of heaven upside down. And so I want you to keep this theme of kingdom of heaven that's throughout Matthew's gospel in the back of your mind, because Jesus is calling all people into this kingdom. And then later on, as Jesus is talking with just his inner group, just his disciples, we read in Matthew chapter 13, starting in verse 44, this story. You read along with me. And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had, and he bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who was looking for fine pearls. And when he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything he had, and he bought it. And that's it. That's the story. We don't have an explanation. We don't have this long diatribe of what Jesus is saying. He just simply iterates. 2 men found something of great value that they went and reoriented their entire life, changed everything that they had been doing about their lives, and they came and got rid of that in order to reorient towards this valuable thing. And Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like that. And the thing I want us to notice in this is that in both of these instances, the men did not view the actions they were taking as loss. But as ridiculous as it may seem, they viewed it as investment. They viewed it as they were investing in something that was worth it, that was valuable. When I was young and I heard these parables, and even into my adulthood, quite honestly, it didn't make a lot of sense. And some days I still struggle for it to make a lot of sense, because there are aspects of my life that, quite frankly, I enjoy and like. And I imagine you do too. I imagine that not everything in your life is bad. There are aspects that, yes, I'm glad over the years I've been able to reorient, whether it was my obsession with sports and not having that rule my life so much, whether it was addiction to my phone, whether it was constantly having to seek entertainment and reorienting it in ways where I'm prioritizing more time with my family and more time with friends and more time with my church, wherever it may be. But there's also aspects of my family where, is this something that constantly needs to be done, where I get rid of everything for one thing? Like, what is Jesus getting at here? What is he actually saying here? So I've been around church or some aspect of faith all my life. From the time I was born, I can recall being in church every Sunday. We were there every Wednesday. We were involved in some form or fashion. And I grew up being a good kid, loving God, wanting to please God and follow him. And I gave up aspects of wanting that when I decided that I want to go off to Bible college and I want to major in ministry and I want to give my life to vocational ministry. And so I did that. I went off to Bible college, graduated, got married, got involved in a church there in our college town for a year, working with middle schoolers, and it was a fantastic learning experience. And then we saw that we couldn't stay here, so it's like we had to leave that behind, even though we were having great things, and we went and worked in a small church in Central Texas while my wife attended law school. And this was a small church. We had maybe 4 or 5 regular kids in our youth group, but we grew over the next 3 years together. And really learning what ministry is in this context, them learning about faith. But we couldn't stay. When my wife graduated, we needed to find opportunities for us to settle elsewhere. And so we left that behind to go and pursue where she could find a position to work in. So we moved up here to North Texas, and I started working as a middle school minister at a larger church. We're moving from 4 to 5 kids. We're now having 40 to 50 kids. And we now are working with middle schoolers. And then there came a season where I felt God was calling us to, well, I'm calling you into high school ministry. And so I started working with high schoolers in the same church. And then there was a season where God was saying, I'm calling you towards working with the adults. Like the work you've done here is coming to completion. I'm calling you towards working with adults. And so I entered into a role where I preached more and where I worked with adult education within the same church. And each time along this step of the journey, there would be moments where there would be this feeling of loss. But I never felt like I was losing, because what I was being called toward was following God each step along the way. And about 3 years ago, our family felt a call into leaving vocational ministry to partner with a church planting organization and start figuring out, well, what would it look like in our neighborhood, because we're really feeling called to reach out to our direct community. And that was a difficult step, because on one hand, I'm leaving behind a trusted income. I'm leaving behind relationships I've built for over a decade. But we trusted that God was calling us, and we've never felt like we made the wrong decision, because each step along the way, God has been faithful. And so 3 years ago, we stepped out, and over the last 3 years, we've had various iterations of ministry and faith that looks like Bible studies in a local senior center, that looks like meetings on Sunday evenings with young adults in our living room, that looks like talking about how do we spread messages within our community and create community events within our school and within our neighborhoods, and getting involved through programs such as Academy 4 and Teen Life and other great organizations that we did not have the time for or capacity for when we were doing other work. And God has been faithful, but it always has come at some feeling initially of loss before seeing that when we follow God's kingdom and trust him, we see the value and investment being made. And don't get me wrong, there's still days where I struggle. That I'm asking, like, am I doing something wrong? Because I started a journey that I feel like I failed at. Maybe it was because I couldn't hack it as a preacher. Maybe it was because I couldn't last as a youth minister. Maybe it's because I wasn't meant to be a church planner. But if I'm honest with myself, we're now entering into a season to where we're feeling God calling us, because through these relationships we never would have built had we not followed in other steps. We've built relationships with local school educators and administrators of learning. There's a great need in our middle school directly within our district, directly within our neighborhood, and seeing that that's a need that I feel not just called for, but passionate about. And so I'm getting certified to be a teacher within middle schools within our local neighborhood. And I'm excited about it. I know that that's crazy for a lot of people who think middle schoolers an excitement, but like, I love it. And I don't know what it's gonna look like. It may look different a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't know. But oftentimes, when we reorient our lives, following where God is leading, we begin to find the treasure that God has in store all along. And here's the thing that I love about this parable, is you have these two individuals who reorient. One kind of happenstance, like finds something in a field. He wasn't looking for it, but he found this valuable treasure. We don't know what the treasure is, but he reorients everything so that he can have that thing. And then you have one who was a merchant. He was looking for pearls. He was looking for a specific pearl. He was intentionally seeking, and he found what he was looking for, and he reoriented everything. And you may find yourself where sometimes you're looking and sometimes you're not, but sometimes you just hear that voice of God. You feel that nudge. You find an opportunity where God is calling you towards something. And the thing that I love about this is it's not just us that I see the story in, but I see that Jesus modeled the same thing. Jesus, he modeled this, and his disciples may not have known it at the time, and oftentimes I didn't always see it, but Jesus did this. He saw treasure, and he said, you know what? It's worth giving up everything. It's worth giving up my divinity. It's worth giving up proximity to the Father, because God, they're worth it. The treasure of people is worth it. And Jesus sold everything, and he died on the cross, taking on the sin that we earned. And he sold it all because he said it's worth it. And I'm so thankful that he, being perfectly sinless, didn't just let death win, but conquered death. And we now have hope in his resurrection. And he now calls us to see the treasure, because here's the beauty of Jesus saw the treasure not as a what, but as a who. And he's trying to lead his people to that. He says the kingdom of heaven is like this. Do you remember from the Beatitudes what the kingdom of heaven it is? It's not a what. It's a group of people. It's the same confusion that we for millennia have messed up about the idea of church. We think of church as a what, but you may have heard lessons, I don't know, but the church is a who. It's a group of people. It's this gathering here. It's when people gather in the name of Jesus. The kingdom of heaven's the same. It's a group of people orienting their lives towards abundant living with God. And Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like this treasure. And Jesus said, you are my treasure. And if you need a little preacher quip to help you remember, here's the quote. Treasured people, which is you, treasure people. Treasured people, treasure people. And I have news for all of us. If the thing, when you look in your life, when you self-reflect and begin asking, where do I place my values and importance? If it's a what, Jesus is calling you, calling us to change. Because our lives are not meant to be lived into a what, it's into a who. Who do we value? Who do we orient life toward? Do we get distracted by things? Of course we do. But we have opportunities and choices time and time again to reorient our lives towards loving our neighbors, loving our family, loving our coworkers, loving our peers, loving those we come across in day-to-day life, whether we are intentionally looking for it or whether we just happen to fall upon it. Are our lives oriented a way that we recognize treasure when it's right in front of us? And are we willing to sacrifice the stuff and the things in our life for the people and the neighbors we interact with? And so my challenge and encouragement for us this week, because this is a great week to apply and practice these parables. We're heading into a week of Thanksgiving. And many of us, some of us will be in circumstances where we're going to be sitting around a table with family or friends or people we love. Some of us may be in circumstances where we are missing someone and grieving someone for the first time this year since a loss. Some of us are going to be in situations where we are going to be around coworkers at work gatherings or in other places. But this week, there is a strong emphasis on Thanksgiving of people. And are we going to orient our life in a way that we are going to choose people over something, someone over something? So if you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table and that one particular brother-in-law who, for whatever reason, just gets under your skin, starts another topic of conversation, they're just like, oh goodness. Are you going to choose a debate? Or are you going to choose the person, the treasure right in front of you and next to you and around you, and choose to extend grace? If that aunt that's around you that for whatever reason just you don't want to be around and you find yourself trying to avoid by going to a different room every time she comes into the room, are you going to choose avoidance or are you going to choose proximity as you seek to love those around you? For some, this may look like having to set up some boundaries or guardrails for those you love, because there may be some situations that you don't want to put your children or family around or into. For some, this may be broadening your focus beyond just your immediate family to think, where are opportunities right in my own backyard, on the street corner, or in my neighborhood where I can extend and show value to the treasure right around me in my life? The question for all of us, how can we reorient our lives to reflect a love for God's kingdom? To orient our lives to reflect the love for our neighbor and family and friends. And so as we leave here this morning, as we go separate ways, as some may travel, as some may be hanging out at home, as others may be traveling to us, may we choose to see the treasure that's right in front of us. May we reorient our lives in such a way that we're not distracted so much by the football game that we can't interact with the ones we love. May we not be so distracted by the debates and the conversations that may inevitably come up around the dinner table that we lose track of the ones we love. May we not be so distracted by our own comfort and familiarity that we forget about those outside our home who may not be having the same experiences we are. May we choose to find and seek treasure and extend value to all those we meet. May we reorient our lives in that way